Thank you. Again, welcome everyone. It is definitely inspiring. It's encouraging to see all of the many faces from different parts of the city, the county, the state, even other countries here that we have a common cause, and that's to make our communities better. So again, I'm inspired every time I come to this conference, and I see so many different people, different faces. And then there are a lot of faces in here that I actually know. I know a lot of people in this room, and I'm inspired. The visitors, whether you're from out of town or another country, you're in good hands. I see a lot of people in this room. They do a lot of great work. So maybe if it's someone you're sitting next to, across from, or in back of you, you're in good hands. So again, welcome. I'm going to do the moderation with two very influential leaders in this city. It has a strong impact on my life and the work that I do as it relates to intervention. And I want to start off with a rhetorical question, an open-ended question, and it is, who is responsible for the decrease in violence in Los Angeles? You don't have to answer that. We'll answer that at the end of this discussion. Let me start by asking the question to both Connie and Chief Beck, who amazingly are sitting here next to each other. It's kind of hard to sit next to someone who has basically sued the pants off of you, and then now you're sitting next to each other. So I guess intervention does work. It's working today. So glad to see both of you. The question is, the LAPD has changed how it operates and engages with community impacted by violence. What specific things have been done to make those changes?
Well, okay, so many things are different in the LAPD of today than yesterday, and a lot of those things are set up with the overall framework viewpoint that we are not the ones solely responsible for the solution against violence in Los Angeles, and because of that, we have opened up collaborations with just about everybody. And so, just to give you an on-the-ground example, when a gang shooting occurs in any part of the city now, in the old days, the detectives would come out, they would put some tape up, they would do their investigation, and they would keep it largely internal. Now, when a gang shooting occurs in Los Angeles, at the same time that the detectives are notified, at the same time that the specialized gang units are notified, our intervention partners are notified. And they come out and don't assist with the investigation, but assist with the aftermath of the shooting. They deal with rumors. Rumors after a gang shooting kill people in Los Angeles. I'm not telling you people in this room anything they don't know. They put down rumors. They help to calm people that are thinking of retaliation, and they deal with community issues. And this is just a small, and this is mandated. There's no option here. This is the way we handle gang shootings in Los Angeles. And that's a hugely different dynamic from the past, and that's just emblematic of the way we handle everything. Everything is done with partnerships in mind, with the understanding that while I'm the one that is responsible when things go wrong in the city of Los Angeles, violence or crime-wise, it's everybody's job to make a difference. And that's what brings the folks in this room together, and that's the difference.
Is my mic on?
I don't think so.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I know you can. Hi, everybody. I'm Connie. I would add to what Chief Beck just said a little bit of the context of how we kind of sort of are at this position in time. I used to wake up every day thinking of a new way to sue LAPD. And I had a great time doing it, okay? I like litigating. And 20 years ago, there was no talking to LAPD.
Or her.
I was more than available to talk, but LAPD did not talk to anybody, not even to their own commissioners. So I know you're going to disagree with this,
I'm not gonna disagree.
and I know.
No better than
It's
that.
all right. It's all right. Back then, what the ACLU and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and all of Johnny Cochran taught me how to pick juries, and there was a whole police misconduct bar because we were kind of sort of at war with our own police department. I also sued the sheriff's department, and when they had the Vikings and whatnot, so it wasn't just LAPD. And there are 44 police agencies in this county, 44 police agencies. The two big dogs are LAPD and LASD. So we were at war. 7, 11, I guess I had as many as 11 class action lawsuits over the years. And we sued representing victims of what we thought was excessive force. We sued for the policing style that was done in South LA, which was kind of an occupation-style policing. I've never been in a city where every single black man said they'd been stopped. The one time LAPD stopped me, I told the officers that it would not end well if they proned me out. And they didn't, Chief. They didn't. You were a sergeant at the time, I think.
I'll find them.
Okay.
Opportunities missed.
I know, opportunities missed. But back then it was war. And what we were after, all of us in this room, with gang intervention and the social workers and the professors who were helping us, the lawyers across the board, we were all suing for constitutional policing. Now, from LAPD's point of view, they were just being kick-ass cops, and they were doing their job, keeping the good communities safe from the poor community, from the bad communities, and the bad guys going after bad guys. I mean, in their minds, they were doing paramilitary policing to the max, and we were at war. We were suing for constitutional policing. After the Rodney King beating, that war began to end. It took another 8 years to the Rampart scandal. You heard it referenced in the introduction. That was the gangster cop scandal. Well, at the time, Captain Beck, when Chief Bratton took over, and we had a consent decree because of the Rampart scandal, Chief Bratton took over, and that's when I saw not the old Beck, but the new Beck. And he saw not the old Connie, the warrior Amazon, but a new Connie who was willing to listen. And it was at that point when Bratton told Captain Beck, you get to Rampart and you fix that gangster cop haven, or I'm going to change the name of that street and shut that division down. And he sent Beck in there to clean it up. He also sent me in there to do the last investigation. They had 4 investigations. They didn't need another investigation. He was just trying to make sure I was too busy to sue him, and he was right. But Chief, that's where you said we have to do this. We have to become partners. We can no longer be enemies. And only through the partnership can. Now let me tell you how far we've come. We've got a long way to go. The Chief and I disagree about how far that has to go. But look at the people in this room. We've got Guillermo Cespedes, our fantastic gang czar. We've got officers here. You would have never seen police officers sitting here for a whole day with us. We've got a room full of interventionists. The best interventionists in the world are here. Okay? Ben, you've got your brothers and sisters here. There are professors. This room is a very special room. And the bottom line, Chief, let me tell them what we're doing with Beyond Partnership, to partnership. When he says partnership, he means it. It doesn't mean that everybody in LAPD has gotten the memo. They haven't. Okay? We're working on it. It takes 14 years of every day. Sergeant Woodall, Captain Olvera.
Bob Green.
Where's Chief Green? Chief Green's in the back. They're so sick of me, they could puncture the tires of my Prius so I couldn't roll anymore. But every day, and then I'm going to shut up, believe it or not. But here's the partnership. Chief Beck in Watts, Nickerson, Jordan, Imperial, and Ramona Gardens. Ramona Gardens obviously is not in Watts. But those 4 housing projects, it's an experiment. I can't say that it's the best thing since sliced bread, but this is what's good about it. Chief Beck means partnership because 50 cops, these 50 cops that are divided between these 4 housing projects, these are the first cops in LAPD history and maybe in the history of this county who will be promoted based on how they demonstrate they avoided arresting a kid. We call it the Community Safety Partnership, and it's Chief Green who is over all of this, and it's Sergeant Woodall who taught us all, who taught LAPD how to deal with gang intervention, and you have some of the change agents, some of the transformers. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a new day. We've got a long way to go. Some of you are probably thinking, well, how come it's so changed? How come I got stopped, and how come my son got stopped? I know what you're thinking. What we're saying is at the top, this is a different organization. This is not Daryl Gates' LAPD anymore, and we're very fortunate to be able to do this experiment.
Okay. Change has definitely taken place in our communities and with the LAPD, but with change comes process, and sometimes processes, you have challenges. Chief Beck, what were some of those challenges in implementing that change? You have to turn the mic back on.
I think I'm okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a huge problem is the change in the attitudes of the organization. You know, I came to this way of thinking after 30 years of doing it different. You know, I was gang cop first in the Watts neighborhoods in the late 70s. You know, I was a gang sergeant during the Operation Hammer, which was probably the most aggressive the LAPD ever was, in a strict occupational enforcement effort against gangs, which, by the way, just strengthens the polarization. It didn't do anything but lock up a bunch of folks temporarily. You know, I have been in charge of gang units in the height of the homicide epidemic in the late 90s. I mean, I've seen every way that LA's done this, up close and personal. And it took me 25 years to come to the realization that this wasn't going to be fixed by the police department alone. That we had to look at this thing at its roots and look at how we could make a difference with other people. And so now my job, or at least the way I see my job, is to try to speed up the learning curve for young police officers. You know, my daughter, my son, and my son-in-law are all gang cops in South Los Angeles. And I want to help them learn in the first year what took me 25. That just because a kid lives in a gang neighborhood, just because a kid is hanging around with some gangsters, doesn't mean that they don't deserve respect, and doesn't mean that you can't change their life. You know, the street does not have to take another generation. And we can do that by working with each other and by recognizing that it's the violence that's the enemy. You know, that it isn't our youth, it's the violence. How do we impact the violence? The youth will find their way. The gang culture will diminish over time. But what we have to stop is the violence.
For Connie have known a lot of the interventionists that are in this room for a very long time before, they actually became a professional interventionist. She know a lot of us by our nicknames, and she knew us, when we were borderline, interventionists slash community activists, whatever we want to call ourselves. Intervention has been around for a long, long, long time. It was more so willy-nilly, though. But you, again, you've taken interventionists who are basically the gatekeepers for the community, and you've gotten them to engage with law enforcement to say, hey, you're going to have to work with them, like it or not. How did that happen?
Great question, Ben. Great question. I recommend my book, Power Concedes Nothing. It tells this story in wonderful detail. You will not be able to put it down. You can get it on Amazon for quite a cheap. And it's coming out in paperback in September. Power Concedes Nothing. I tell the story. I also tell a lot about Chief Beck, but I'm not going to embarrass him here, but you can read it in the book. Ben, I remember the day I went to Bo Taylor, probably the gang interventionist I was closest to. And there were very few gang interventionists I would trust my reputation and Harry Belafonte's reputation with. Bo was one of them. There were maybe 3 over the 20 years. And I went to Bo and I said, Bo, war ain't working. It's fun, but it isn't working. I'm going to have to go inside. You're going to see me talking to police. You're going to see me going to lunch with them. You're going to see me, instead of acting like a warrior Amazon, I'm actually going to be nice. I'm not going to be litigating. I have to learn why they're afraid. I have to learn why they're aggressive. I have to understand them if I'm going to help them change themselves. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I have to do with the officers what I had to do with you. And he got it. He gave me permission, Ben. Bo said, you're one of the craziest women I've ever met, but you do what you need to do because you've never steered me wrong. I needed the police to stop harassing interventionists. I needed the police to stop trying to arrest Bo and instead sit down with him and figure out how to protect the children in his neighborhood. I needed the police to help find jobs for the young men so there was an alternative to running the streets with a gang. And police are very powerful. I know, I should know. I've sued them long enough. And I just told Bo that we had to change. We had to flip it. We had to stop. You keep doing what you do and you still get the same result. You got to change. We had to change. All of us had to change. It wasn't just the police who had to change. And Bo had to change too, because he certainly learned how to work parallel with police, alongside them, separate, but alongside them, to keep the kids safe, to keep the mothers and the grandmothers safe. And from there, we went and we did the report. You helped us with the report. Everybody in this room helped with that big report that ended up creating GRID and the marvelous engines that we have. We've got to make them 10 times bigger, but I think things are a lot better.
All right. Thank you. Chief Beck, the interventionists, it becoming professionalized, they were trying to find their way to define exactly what intervention was. And we know that a lot of law enforcement were encountering people who were saying, well, I do intervention. And so you would, have an officer that would pull someone over. If they don't have a license plate, you look at the ignition and there's a screwdriver hanging out. And he says, I'm an interventionist. But the interventionist says, no, you're not. You're a car thief. So we had to define who and what and how intervention is done and how it's done. But yet and still, we still, with all due respect to law enforcement, you guys were still encountering people who said that they did intervention, but to us they didn't. How did that relationship begin to mold interventionists a little bit better with law enforcement, where you guys begin to understand interventionists a little bit better?
Well, Ben, I think there's a couple of answers there, and one, you have to model it, right? And so, I try to model it. Sergeant Woodle does, Chief Green. Obviously, a lot of the strong proponents that see the value of intervention in saving lives model it. But a lot of it also has to be through demonstration of the effectiveness of the model, which, cops are very pragmatic folks. We believe, as a general rule in the profession, you are after things that work, and you just can't deny the results. So we have cut gang homicide in particular by 2/3 since we started the intervention model. I mean, that's incredible. But the other thing, and this is a long discussion that Connie and I had when we first started on this path, is that we have to raise the professionalism, and you talked a little bit about it, of intervention workers. We have to. It isn't enough just to say you are one. You have to be able to demonstrate it. So how do you do that? Well, you have a training curriculum, which of course I'm sure we'll talk about here. We have the first gang intervention academy in the world. Yep, funded by the city of Los Angeles, and that helps professionalize the profession. But the other thing is that we don't just send, as you well know, interventionists to the academy. I also send police officers, not for the full academy, but so that they become familiarized with what it's all about. So that if they do pull somebody over and he says he's an interventionist, well, who do you work for? You got some ID from there? Are you a graduate of the academy? They can do a little bit of investigation and quickly find out if somebody is or is not involved in legitimate intervention. So, and that, of course, that's a huge byproduct for this. And for people that are from other places that are considering this is really important, because the biggest thing that stands in your way of having a successful intervention program is the fear of the political establishment that this is going to blow up in their face, that they are going to hire some former gang members and they're not going to be quite so former, and there's going to be some bad things that happen, and then it's all going to fall down on them. Well, first of all, you have to do it. We're going to do the absolute best we can to professionalize, to vet, not to find somebody with an absolutely squeaky clean past, because that's not going to happen, but to make sure that somebody has a squeaky clean present. That's what you're looking for. And so you have to have a way to do that. You have to have a way to make sure that they know how to stay out of trouble, and that's part of the academy, is teaching people what it's like to work for a large government agency when you've never done so in the past. What your role is, having the definition of roles between cops and intervention workers is absolutely key. We do what we do. You do what you do. We're going the same place. We're taking different roads, but we got to keep that. We got to keep a separation for the safety of intervention, and to make sure that people understand that it's legitimate, that they can talk to somebody from intervention about things and not expect it to get back to the police. And so there are tons of pitfalls that we have navigated, generally successfully, but not always, but always learning as we go.
Ben, it took enormous courage. It's on.
Yeah.
It took enormous courage on the part of many people, including yourself. I would like all of the men and women who created the Gang Intervention Academy to please stand. Stand up. Come on, you're in the room. Stand.
Get correct.
Stand. There was an army There was an army of some of the best gang interventionists in the world who created that academy. And I will never forget when Mayor Villaraigosa, in his press room, looked at the press and said, "You all are waiting for one of these guys to fall off the wagon, and then you think I'm going to run? I'm not running because my police chief says that we have to have intervention to keep the neighborhoods safe. So even if one of these guys messes up, I'm going to do it just like when a cop messes up. I'm just going to get him rehabilitated, and we're going to keep on trucking." So that took enormous political courage. For those of you from other cities, I'll bet my mortgage your mayor wouldn't do that, okay? So you have to have an enormously courageous police chief, because it was not, you should have seen that room. It was all wall to wall former gangsters, now interventionists, right? The chief of staff was about to die. He was about to die because it's like one picture, and that's the end of his boss's career. It took enormous courage for a police chief to stand up. Chief Beck's first ask of the city council when he became chief of police was to fund the Gang Intervention Academy. He marched into City Hall. Guillermo Cespedes was standing with him, and he said, "Fund this now." How many police chiefs? When I said that to Gary Slutkin, do you remember the movie The Interrupters? We were on a conference call with them, and they said, "Dr. Slutkin, shut up for a minute. Your chief did what?" They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that we actually talked. I mean, LAPD has the gang intervention guys on racer notification. I mean, it's more than coordination. This is truly extraordinary. Now, in 60 Minutes, they were talking about insurgency. I said, "What do you mean insurgency? Well, we wrote about that 10 years ago, and nobody understands that with what we've done in this city, in and around the Summer Night Lights program, gang homicides get reduced by 57% in the heat of the summer." Okay, there's nobody in the country or the world doing that. It only happens here. So I think we need to give LA a hand.
In professionalizing intervention, it also meant that they were going to go to another level. And part of intervention meant that telling the story, not on the street corner or just being able to communicate it, but funders viewed it as if it's not documented, it never happened. And so interventionists had to be brought to that level. And for Connie, what is the importance of that, and how much of an impact would that actually change the work?
Had to be brought to the level of what?
For them to be able to document the work that they did, by it being documented, did that change the course? Was the work still being done effectively? Did it modify it?
It's hard to document how you averted a shooting. It's hard to document that you kept someone from following the ambulance to the emergency room to finish off the kill. It's hard to document that you prevented something. It's hard to prove something that doesn't exist. So it was hard. Now, there are some things that you can show. We always go to the crime rates because that's the thing that the press understands, is the thing that politicians understand. Believe me, this work hangs by a thread. Every time we go through the summer, Guillermo Cespedes is just brilliant with the way that he and Alicia, I would like all of the grid workers to stand up for a minute. We need to give them a hand. They are just incredible. Grid, stand, fun, grid. There we go. They don't get to sleep in the summer, and they put their lives on the line. They're like the interventionists. They don't have badges and they don't have guns, but they're out there in the parks, and they're organizing the entire neighborhood for wraparound safety. It's a public health model that Billy Weiss helped to pioneer here with Deborah Pratho-Stiff, the PhD from Harvard, who said, you know what, violence is a disease, and we need to fight it like a disease. It's not a war. We don't need to be locking up every kid
We need to fight it like a disease. And when Chief Beck decided, yes, it's a disease, and we need to fight the violence. Let's not go after the kids. Let's fight the violence. And then Guillermo Cespedes has taken it to an incredible level, pioneering prevention programs. So when you say document, we're trying to figure out how to document everybody's work, including different ways. How do you measure? We're trying to figure out how we're going to prove when cops come and say, I worked with this family so that I didn't have to arrest their son. How are we going to document that? Well, they're going to document the meetings. They're going to document the programs they introduce the kids to. They're going to document the efforts that they made to get the family into other kinds of programs and to get medical help. They're going to document all of the efforts as officers that they made so that that family could be healthier and that kid stay out of trouble. So for gang interventionists, they've got to show the meetings. They've got to show the folks they met with. They've got to show the reading that they've done. They've got to show the patterns of how they know their neighborhood. And they've got to show the kids they've interacted with and saved. It can be done. It can be done. And Gary Slutkin actually has a formula for showing averted shootings. And that also can be used.
Another question for Connie, and here's my short story for the out-of-towners. Believe it or not, once upon a time, Los Angeles was notorious for winning NBA championships. Once, I don't know what happened, I don't know what went on this year, but yeah. But during those championship winnings, there were two particular players that played for the Lakers, Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. And the word on the street was that these guys, they don't see eye to eye, they don't get along, what have you, but they win championships together. They had the capacity to collaborate to get something done. Connie, what is the magic that happens with the community, with the intervention, with law enforcement, that even though they might not see eye to eye, what gets them to collaborate and work together?
They decide to love the kids.
Once everybody decides that they want to see the kids thrive, once they decide that these precious children are worth saving, there's nothing like seeing a cop fall in love with the kids in East LA and South LA. Poor LA. There's nothing like it. It's magic. There's nothing like seeing a former gangster look those kids in the eye and say, I have to atone. I terrorized this neighborhood for 10 years, and I made it hard for you, and now I'm here to help you because I'm atoning. I'm going to help this neighborhood heal. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to make sure you don't do what I did. Don't join this gang. It's the love of the kids, Taco. That's Ben, I'm sorry. I knew I was going to do that. That's what it is. Johnny Godinez got up every day. Johnny just passed, and it broke my heart because he was only 52. And he got up every day to save the children in Ramona, in East LA. I mean, he was all over the East Side. He was an incredible ambassador. He was a hellion when he was young, but Johnny spent 30 years protecting children. You know, it's love.
All right. Chief Beck, for the longest, ever since I've known you, you've always been a champion, a supporter of intervention, and you're not camera shy about it. You'll tell anyone on any camera, any place, why you believe in intervention and why you believe that it works. In doing so, intervention has found that at the upper layer of administration, chiefs and commanders, and the relationship is there. On the other flip side of that, it's with intervention, getting the community persuaded to say, hey, we have a relationship going on. So on both ends, with LAPD and the community, it has to be communicated to the people who are actually on the street corners. How is it being filtered through line officers on the street that intervention is productive for all of us?
Curtis, stand up. So I have carefully handpicked ambassadors from me that do training for all gang officers and all the LAPD officers, but primarily gang officers, because we have about 600 officers that are assigned specifically to control gang violence in the city of Los Angeles. And they're very effective about putting my message out. And, you know, everything that we do as managers asks, what was the inclusion of intervention? Well, you know, you had a shooting, okay, you did what? You put more officers here, you know, you changed days off to meet, whatever the other criteria was. Well, how did you use intervention? You know, who'd you talk to? And so all of that, you know, we're a very inquiring organization about what our managers do. You know, we have a system called ComStab where meetings are held every week, and people are asked quite pointed questions about what they did about the problems in their area of responsibility. And that's what drives the change in activity or the change in behavior by our folks. Now, you know, everybody always asks, well, you know, because that takes care of the behavior. Well, what about the heart? You know, what about the way they think about this? You know, and that's one of the reasons that I talk to this group. That's one of the reasons that every time I stand up, no matter who it's in front of, and the topic comes up, I'm very vocal about my support, because they need to know that this is something that I believe in. And they need to know that this is something that has been proven to be effective. And they need to know that this is something that I don't just expect, I demand. You know, Connie never likes to talk about it, but we are a paramilitary organization, and people, you know, do follow the rules of the boss, and I make sure they do. And, you know, I believe in this, and it has made a difference, and it does. Does every police officer? Can one of you go find a police officer you know and have them say something disparaging about gang intervention? I'll bet you can. But they won't say it to me. And more importantly, they won't act like it when they're working for me. And that's how you do it. And you know, and then over time, just like everything else, this organization will come to be, I think, the best speaking point, the best proponent for this type of work in the world, because that's how we change.
While I guess someone is going around collecting the cards, we only have a few minutes left to get the questions out. Real quick, Chief Beck he's actually being modest. Even though he's delegated people to do that, he's on hands, because I've seen him playing basketball in the projects. Now, where else do you see that? You know, I don't know if you guys won or not, because I didn't stick around.
Depends on which team I bring.
Yeah.
But one of the, of course, I love talking about this, because you know, one of the things that you got to do is you have to teach people not to be afraid. You know, you have to teach people that just because something is not what you're used to doesn't mean you got to fear it. You know, just because you grew up in some place that was safe and there wasn't conflict, and you know, doesn't mean that everybody did, and doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. So one of the things that I do is you know, I'll go play in any of the housing developments, and I have. There's actually no housing development I haven't played ball in, and I do it not because, well, I'm not, you know, I'm an old guy, I'm not any good anymore, but I do it to show that there's nothing to be afraid of. You know, that we're all in this together. You know, this is all about, as Connie said, saving kids and reducing violent crime. And you don't have to fear somebody just because they don't look like you, or they don't have the same experience than you. And if they got a couple of tattoos that are scary, so what? You know, I imagine when I'm in my uniform, I'm kind of scary too. You know, these are all minor things. And once you get beyond them, then you can start doing some work together.
Do we have the questions? No. Okay. No cards? Okay, real quick, Connie, we know there won't be any basketball anytime soon for you.
But she's not afraid of anything either, I'll tell you that.
But you also are doing some things under the radar that are definitely impacting the communities, some things that are going on in Watts. And out of all the things, I mean, you know, you could pick and choose what you wanted your fight to be. Why deal with gangs? Why not something else? Why gangs?
I'm a civil rights lawyer, and there are no civil rights without safety. So if a kid can't walk to school, he or she doesn't have any civil rights. If a kid's not safe in their own home or in their own cluster of units, they don't have any civil rights. Safety is the first of all civil rights, and freedom from violence is the first of all freedoms. So, ladies and gentlemen, simple as that. So our job, and what are we doing if we can't protect kids? Every child, I don't care where they're from, I don't care how they got here, every child deserves safety. They have to be safe or they can't learn. They have to be safe. They don't thrive. And you know, the standard in law is failure to thrive. A court will take your children away from you if it makes a finding that they are failing to thrive. Well, in these neighborhoods, the children were failing to survive. How do you go to bed at night knowing that those kids have PTSD levels higher than the soldiers coming back from Iraq? How do you walk your sculptured poodle at night in Beverly Hills knowing that there are child soldiers 8 miles south of you? I couldn't do it. Chief Beck couldn't do it. Guillermo Cespedes couldn't do it. Captain Olvera couldn't do it. We have to fix this. It is the first obligation to every citizen to give them safety.
Okay, real quick, we got 3 questions and we got about 3 minutes, so it's going to be hidden quick. The first question is, mental health and police have a different perspective about what the problem is. How can we connect those two worlds?
Well, that's a huge question. It'll take more than a minute. We do a lot of work with mental health practitioners, but we need to do more of it. You know, we have down in the Skid Row area, we have combined teams that go out and work that, but we need to do it on the gang venue. And one of the problems with the mental health system is not a problem. One of the obstacles is the county system. So it's a little more difficult for the city to work with it. But that is a good point, and it is something that needs to be looked at.
And I need to add, Ben, that let's be honest here. This has nothing to do with the police. Our policy as Americans is to lock up the mentally ill. It is to throw them away. We treat them like trash, and we prosecute them. So we need to look at our politicians. I don't look to the police for this, because the police, we get the policing with the mentally ill that we ask for. We have cut $6 billion with a B out of mental health clinics. We have shut all the local clinics. So I'm sorry, you pushed a button with me, but I'm not, you know, I'm pissed about this. You know, don't talk about the mentally ill. We don't give a damn about the mentally ill. We spend our mentally ill resources, our mental health resources on the rich. And they're trying to stop being anorexic or something. I don't mean to say that, but body image stuff. And our kids are trying to survive, you know? No, we're not serious about mental health at all, and that's not a policing issue. That's a political issue and a policy issue.
Our looks like this is going to be our last question and closing remarks, one and the same. On a personal note, this is for both of you. On a personal note, what keeps you optimistic when things seem to be hanging by a string?
Okay. You know, I am optimistic because even though, you know, we have tragedies that occur and we will continue to have those, there'll be over at least 100, maybe 150, primarily young men that get killed as a result of gang violence during this year. That's far too many. But I've been doing this a long time. I know what a huge leap it is from when we had 800 to 1,000 killed every year. And I know we're making progress. And when I look, you know, when I talk to young police officers, and as I mentioned, you know, my children are police officers, and I talk to their friends, and I go on my ride-alongs, and I start hearing some of the things that I've said start coming back to me. You know, they're saying them, and they're starting to understand. You know, I've got nothing but positive feelings about this. You just can't lose your way because things don't change completely overnight. You know, if you look back to where we were when I was at South Bureau and you were Taco, Skip still Skip, but just think how far we've come. I mean, and so how could you not be optimistic about that?
I totally agree with the Chief. And Chief, I just want to thank you when you said, Connie, I need a partner, and convinced me to stop suing you and become your partner.
I don't remember it that way, but
I
that's
know,
fine.
I know.
This is like it's like having your ex-wife talk about your marriage. You know, the facts are the same, but the point of view is completely different.
Read it in here. The truth is in here. Buy my book. But here's why I have faith. My great-grandmother and I'm the great-granddaughter of slaves and slave owners. My grandmother used to have to sit in the dark with a rifle over her knee and wait for the night riders to come. And I'm her granddaughter, and I live almost a perfect life, completely free and free of violence. And I'm not going to stop until every kid has that too.
We opened up with a rhetorical question as who is responsible for the decrease in violence in Los Angeles? The answer is we all are.
Everybody.
Everybody's inclusive. And we all don't do the same thing, but we all make a contribution to stop it. Again, thank you for your transparency. Thank you for answering the questions. And again, looking forward to see everyone tomorrow. I think we had some closing remarks, though. Thank you again.
Thank you.